In the year 2590, Earth was full of machines, noise, and signals. Satellites circled the planet like bees. Radio towers blinked with lights across cities. But in all that sound, there was one signal no one noticed. No one, except a man named Ray. Carson Ray was not a hero, not a captain, not even a soldier. He was just a mechanic. He worked in a dusty repair dock near the edge of New Detroit. He fixed old spaceships, replaced fuel pipes, and drank cheap coffee. But one night, something strange happened. Ray was checking a broken antenna from a junk freighter. As he tuned the signal bands, he heard something. It was not static, not a voice, not code. It was music, a soft, echoing melody that felt like it came from a dream. It was beautiful and sad. It pulled at something deep inside him. He looked around, but no one else reacted. "Hey," he said to his coworker, "Ben, you hear that?" Ben shrugged, chewing gum. "Hear what?" "It's all static." Man Ray played the frequency for others, but no one heard the song. They laughed at him, said he needed sleep. Even the AI scanners found nothing unusual, but Ray couldn't stop hearing it. Day and night, it played in his head. It was like someone was calling him, not with words, but with emotion. He started researching the signal. It came from deep space, far beyond the trade routes. A dead zone where no ships traveled. The source was weak, as if it was fading. Ray tried to report it. The space network laughed. The military ignored it. One officer said, "We don't chase ghost signals, especially from junkers." But Ray couldn't let it go. Something inside him said it was real. So he made a decision. He took his savings, bought parts, and rebuilt an old cargo ship. It was slow, ugly, and barely held together. But it could fly, and that was enough. He named the ship Signal Dancer. And one night, without telling anyone, he launched. As Earth faded behind him, the song grew stronger. It was guiding him now, pulling him like a magnet. Days passed in silence. Ray traveled beyond the last marked star charts. He saw dying stars, cold moons, and black space. And then he found it. A small planet, dark and quiet, hidden behind a red gas cloud, orbiting it. Was a station old and broken. It looked abandoned, like a ghost in space. Ray's ship connected to the airlock. Inside, it was cold and silent. Metal walls were covered in dust and strange markings. Power was low. But something still worked. The cryo chamber, and inside it was her, a girl, not human, but not strange either. She had smooth, pale skin, silver hair floating in the cold. Her body was still, but her eyes glowed faint blue. Ray stepped closer. Breath caught in his chest. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping in ice. The song was louder here. Coming from the pod, from her, Ray touched the glass. Slowly, the song stopped. Silence. Then, a flicker, her eyes opened, just slightly. Ray jumped back. Heart racing, she looked at him, not with fear, but like she already knew him. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then the chamber beeped. Systems activating. A voice played from the translator panel. "Are you the one who heard me?" Ray stared, frozen. I think so," he said, voice shaking. She smiled, weakly. Then her eyes closed again. The chamber lights dimmed, but didn't shut off. She was still alive. Ray stood there, alone in the dark. Station, a million questions in his head. Who was she? What was this place? And why was he the only one who heard her call? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. This was not just an alien. This was someone left behind. Someone who reached out into the void, and somehow her signal found him. Ray looked at her again and said quietly, "I don't know who you are, but I'm not leaving you here." He started the pod's power systems. The ship hummed to life, and just like that, the adventure began. Ray didn't know how long he stood there, watching the cryo chamber hum softly. The alien girl inside looked peaceful, almost human, but not quite. Her skin was pale with a slight shimmer. Her silver hair floated weightless, like she belonged to space itself. He had come here chasing a signal no one else could hear. And now, standing in the ruins of a forgotten station, he wondered if he was dreaming. Back on his ship, Ray activated the medbay functions inside the chamber. The AI system translated the alien text slowly, struggling to understand the language. Eventually, it showed one line in English. Blinking on the screen, revival sequence initiated. Life form stable, consciousness returning. Ray stepped back, his heart beating fast. The pod opened with a hiss, and a rush of cold vapor spilled into the room. The girl's body trembled slightly. Her eyes fluttered. Then opened again. This time, wider, clearer. Watching him, Ray knelt beside her, speaking softly. "Can you understand me?" She blinked slowly. Then a voice came from the translator speaker. "Yes, your words are strange, but I understand." Her voice was gentle, but full of something heavy. She tried to sit up, but winced in pain, her body still weak from the long sleep. Ray helped her, careful and slow. "I'm Ray," he said. "You were sending a song. It came to me." The girl looked at him with tired but curious eyes. "I am Alana," she said. "You followed the song." No one was meant to hear it. Ray frowned. "I was the only one who did." Alana's gaze dropped to the floor. She looked like someone who had lost everything. "This place was not meant to be found," she whispered. "It was my tomb." Ray's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. He had heard of alien ruins, ancient war zones, lost outposts, but never something like this. Ilana began to speak again. Slowly, her voice distant. "I come from Etherin, a world that no longer breathes." She paused. As if saying the name brought her pain. "My people were creators, thinkers. We built machines that touched stars." She looked at Ray, her eyes darkening. "But knowledge brings fear, and fear brings war." She told him how her planet had been destroyed by an alliance of empires, not because they wanted land or power, but because they feared what her kind might become. The Etherians had created a technology, old as the stars, capable of bending gravity, time, and even death. Ilana was one of the last minds who carried part of that knowledge. Hidden in her DNA like a living archive, her people tried to save her. They placed her in this station far from war, hidden behind codes and barriers. The song, she said, was a memory crystal connected to her life force. If she ever awoke, the song would play, not to call for help, but to mourn. No one was meant to come, she said again, her voice shaking. No one would have come. Not even from my own people. Ray didn't speak for a while. He looked around the empty ship, the broken walls, the quiet stars outside the window. "I did." He finally said, "I'm just a mechanic, but I came." Alana studied him, her eyes softening. "You are ... human. Yes. I have read of your kind, strong hearts, dangerous minds." Ray chuckled, a little nervous. "We're not that great," he said. "But we don't leave people behind." Suddenly, a loud beep echoed through the ship. Ray jumped up and checked. The control panel, the ship's scanners were picking up something. A movement, no, several, heading toward the planet. Ray's blood ran cold. "They found us," Alana said quietly, without needing to see the screen. Ray turned to her. "Who?" Her answer came like a storm. "The Syndicate. They hunt what they fear." Ray didn't know what to do yet, but one thing was clear. He couldn't stay here, and he couldn't leave her. He looked at Ilana. "Still weak, still recovering, but alive. We're getting out of here," he said, moving to the cockpit. "I'll keep you safe." Ilana looked at him, then toward the stars. "No one ever said that to me before," she whispered. The engines of Signal Dancer roared to life. The cryostation fell behind them, fading into shadow. In front of them was danger, pursuit, maybe death. But Ray didn't care. He had heard a song no one else could hear, and he had answered it, whatever came next. He wouldn't run. Not from the girl, not from the fight, not from the stars. The stars were silent, but danger was coming fast. Ray stared at the ship's screen, watching 3 red dots blink closer. Unknown vessels, no ID tags, no open comms. Only one thing moved, that quietly: Syndicate hunters. Ilana didn't look surprised. She sat near the back of the cockpit, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her skin still pale, her eyes locked on the display. "They're not here to ask questions," she said, her voice calm. "They're here to erase the last witness." Ray's hands moved fast across the controls. "I didn't come all the way out here to get erased," he muttered. He pulled the ship hard to the left, boosting toward a nearby asteroid field. The old thrusters groaned, but they obeyed. The enemy ships followed without hesitation, black, sleek, and deadly. Syndicate interceptors were fast and light. Ray's ship was old and heavy, not built for speed. He cursed under his breath. Pushing the ship harder, the asteroids were spinning. Slowly, like silent giants dancing in the dark. Ray flew through them like he'd done it 100 times, but he hadn't. And the ship's warning lights screamed in protest. Metal scraped against stone as they squeezed between 2 massive rocks. "Hang on," Ray shouted, gripping the controls. Ilana said nothing. But her hand tightened on the seat. A blast shook the ship. The Syndicate had fired a missile. It clipped the rear stabilizer. Sparks flew. Alarms wailed. Ray slammed the emergency override and cut power. Everything went dark. They drifted in the shadows of the asteroid belt. Silent, invisible, like dust in the wind, they'll scan. Ilana whispered. Ray nodded, whispering back, like the ships could hear them. "Not if we don't breathe." Seconds passed, then minutes. The hunters flew by, scanning, waiting. Circling like wolves, one came close, too close. Ray's fingers hovered above the weapons panel, ready, even if he didn't stand a chance. Then, finally, the red dots faded from the radar. The ships moved on, thinking they were dead or lost. Ray exhaled, slowly. "We're not dead yet," he said, with a tired smile. Ilana looked at him, quiet for a long moment. "You flew like someone who didn't care about dying," she said. Ray leaned back in the seat. "I didn't come here to die," he said. "But I didn't come here to run either." He got up, walked toward the back of the ship to check damage. Pipes were leaking, panels were smoking. He grabbed a wrench and started working without thinking. Ilana followed him, watching. "You're not like the others," she said. "Most humans I studied feared what they couldn't control." Ray didn't look up. "I'm a mechanic, not a soldier. I don't need to control everything. Just fix what's broken." She tilted her head. "And what if something is too broken to fix?" He paused, wiped sweat from his face. "Then I try harder," he said. For the first time, Ilana smiled, a real one. Not sad or guarded, just soft, but the moment didn't last. The ship's radar pinged again. Not Syndicate ships this time, but a listening station nearby, hidden in the asteroid field. Ray looked at it with surprise. "I didn't know this was here," he said. Ilana's face went pale. "It's not just a station," she said slowly. "It's a trap." Suddenly, a new signal filled the ship. It wasn't a song. It was a voice, deep and mechanical. "Unknown vessel. Power down immediately. Surrender the Aetheran ray." Clenched his jaw. "No," he said out loud. Then again, louder. "No, not this time." He powered up the engines, shields and weapons. The ship shook, still damaged, still barely flying. But Ray didn't care. Ilana looked at him. "You're Going to fight them? With this old thing? Ray smiled without humor. This old thing and one angry human heart. He launched flares, spun the ship, and charged toward the enemy station. Laser blasts lit up the darkness, and he flew like he was born for chaos. Ilana held on tight as Ray dodged one missile, then another. He aimed the last charge of the plasma cannon and fired. The shot hit a weak point on the station's antenna. The signal died instantly, buying them seconds. Just seconds. Ray hit hyperspace coordinate set for a hidden moon he used to visit as a smuggler's pit stop. The stars stretched, then blinked. They were gone. Silence filled the ship again, broken only by Ray's breath. Ilana was still standing, eyes wide. "You're insane," she whispered. Ray laughed, exhausted. "Maybe," he said. "But you're not dead, so it's working." She looked at him like he was something new, something dangerous, something rare, and maybe, just maybe, something she could trust. The moon was quiet, hidden in the shadow of a dead gas giant. Ray's ship landed roughly on the surface, kicking up silver dust. The engines coughed once, then died completely. It was the safest place left in this part of the galaxy, and maybe the last. Inside the ship, everything was cold, broken, and silent. Ray walked through the narrow corridor. Holding a light, pipes hissed softly. Walls cracked from stress. He reached the back room, where Ilana was waiting. She stood near the window, watching the stars through the cracked glass. Her silver hair floated gently, glowing under the emergency lights. Ray didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside her, staring at the same stars. She spoke before he could. "I didn't want to tell you everything," she said. Her voice was flat, not cold, but tired, like someone who had carried a secret for too long. Ray turned his head slightly, waiting, not pressing. "I am not just the last of my kind," she continued. "I am the last vault." Ray blinked, confused. "Vault? In my DNA," she said, "is something ancient. Older than my people, older than memory." She stepped away from the window and turned to face him. "My ancestors discovered a machine buried deep inside a black star. It wasn't made by us. It wasn't made by anything that exists now." Ray listened, silent. "We didn't understand it fully, but we learned how to link minds with code," she said. "My body holds the last key, the last part of the equation. It's why they want me." Ray crossed his arms. "And what happens if they get it?" Ilana hesitated. "Then they can restart the machine," she whispered, "and reshape reality itself." The silence that followed was heavy. Ray looked down, then shook his head slowly. "Great," he said. "So we're not just running from bounty hunters, we're running from the end of reality." Ilana almost smiled. "Yes," she said. "That's about right." Ray walked to the center console, slammed his hand against it. A panel fell off the side. "Perfect," he muttered. "Absolutely perfect." She moved closer, watching him try to repair the scanner feed. "You're not afraid," she said. "Surprised." "I am," Ray said. "But fear doesn't fix engines." Ilana sat down on the bench beside him. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." Ray glanced at her. "I followed the signal, remember? I chose this." She looked at the wall for a while, then said softly, "There's more." Ray raised an eyebrow. "Of course there is. I was supposed to destroy the knowledge," she said. "But I couldn't. I was young, afraid. I sealed it inside myself instead." Ray leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "So you're telling me that this entire war, all this chasing, all the deaths, it's because you made a choice to live?" Ilana didn't answer. She just looked away, ashamed. Ray let out a long breath, then sat beside her. "Good," he said. She looked at him sharply. "What?" "You lived," he said. "That's what matters. That's why I'm still." Here they sat in silence, just two souls in a broken ship hiding from the galaxy. But peace didn't last. Suddenly, a red light blinked on the console. Ray ran to check it, his face growing pale. Someone's pinging the ship. They found. Us again. Ilana stood quickly. How? I thought this place was invisible. It was, Ray said. Until someone turned on a transmitter, they both looked toward the back room. Where they stored supplies, Ray pulled out his blaster, hand steady. He opened the door slowly. Inside was a small black sphere, blinking, a beacon. Someone had placed it there. Recently, Ray picked it up carefully. That's Syndicate tech, he said, voice low. Someone tagged us. Ilana stepped back, fear in her eyes. There's no one else here, she said. Ray stared at the device, then at the entrance of the ship. The door wasn't broken. It had been opened. They weren't alone. Ray grabbed a wrench in one hand, blaster in the other. He looked at Ilana. Stay behind me. They moved slowly through the ship, checking corners, ready for a fight, but they didn't find anyone. Instead, they found a message burned into the metal wall with heat plasma. You're not the only one who answered the song. Ray stared at the words. His throat went dry. Ilana whispered, someone else heard it. Ray nodded, and they're already here. Ray didn't sleep that night. He sat in the cockpit of the broken ship, staring at the message burned into metal. You're not the only one who answered the song. The words felt like a whisper in the back of his mind, one that didn't belong. To him, Ilana stayed in the engine bay, quiet, distant. She was trying to meditate, connect with whatever remained of her people through memory pulses. But even she could feel it. Someone else had been here, and they had left a message. Not just for her, but for him. Ray knew the Syndicate didn't leave messages. They erased, they hunted, they didn't play games. So this was someone else, someone human maybe, or worse, something that used to be when the sun of the dead gas giant began to rise. Casting red light across the moon's surface, the attack came. No warning, no scanners, just fire. The ship shook hard, metal cracked, alarms screamed like wounded animals. Ray was thrown against the wall, blood in his mouth. Ilana came running, her eyes glowing faintly again. They're jamming all signals, she said. We're blind, Ray. Stumbled to the weapon console, hands shaking. I don't need sight to shoot, he growled. But the truth was, they were outnumbered, outgunned. A Syndicate boarding crew had landed just outside, marching through the dust in heavy suits. Faceless and fast. Ray checked the ammo counter. 1 plasma cell, 2 EMP grenades, a rusted knife. That was all. He turned to Ilana. You can't fight. You're still healing. She nodded. I know. Ray stared at her, then nodded once. Slowly. Then I'll go. Before she could argue, he was already at the hatch. Sealing her inside, the doors closed, and for the first time since they met, they were separated by more than silence. Ray stepped out onto the dusty surface of the moon. Blaster in one hand, EMP grenade in the other. The Syndicate troopers appeared from the smoke. 6 of them, weapons raised. He didn't wait. He threw the first grenade and ran. Light exploded, systems shorted, 2 suits dropped. The others opened fire. Lasers cutting into the ground where Ray had just been. He slid behind a rock, fired 1 wild shot, then another, missed both. Didn't matter, it was noise, distraction. He moved fast, weaving between shadows. Getting closer to the landing ship the Syndicate had used, if he could just take it. Maybe a blast hit him in the leg, he screamed. Fell hard, face in the dust. The troopers marched toward him, weapons glowing red. Ray tried to crawl, but his body wouldn't move. Pain was drowning his thoughts. A shadow passed over him. Boots hit the ground beside his head. A voice came through the helmet, not robotic, not cold, but human. Didn't think it'd be you, Ray, the voice said. Ray looked up, blood in his mouth. He blinked, tried to focus. The figure took off. The helmet. It was a woman, scar over her left eye, hair buzzed short. He recognized her instantly. Captain Mira Vex, ex-soldier. Now mercenary. Once his partner. Once something more. You're working for the syndicate now. He coughed. She shrugged. They pay, I shoot. Simple math. You know who she is, Ray said, voice rough. You know what they'll do to her. I know, she said, not smiling. But I also know what happens if you win. Ray narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? She leaned closer. It means I saw the memory crystal, too. She whispered. I heard the song. Ray, I remembered. Just like you. Ray's head spun. You were there, you followed it too. I followed it, she said, but I didn't. Find hope. I found power. She stood up, aimed her weapon at his chest. They only need her alive. They didn't say anything about you. Ray laughed through the pain. That's the difference between us, he said. You heard. A song and thought it was a weapon. I heard it and thought. Someone needed help before she could pull the trigger. A blast of white light knocked her off her feet. The syndicate troopers froze. Turning to the source, Ilana, standing in the ship's doorway, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. Her body floated slightly, like the gravity didn't matter anymore. She raised her hand and spoke a single word in her ancient tongue. The ground cracked. A pulse of energy spread out like a shockwave, throwing everyone back. Ray felt the pain in his leg vanish. The dust clear from his lungs. He stood up slowly, amazed. Ilana's power faded, her body trembling. She dropped to her knees. Ray caught her before she hit the ground. Too soon, she whispered. I wasn't ready. Ray held her close. I've got you, he said. You saved me. She looked up at him, eyes dimming. I didn't want to use it, she said, but I couldn't lose you. He smiled. Even as sirens echoed in the distance, you're not going to. They looked back at the burning ships, the broken soldiers, the rising smoke. Ray knew this wasn't over. The syndicate would return, stronger, angrier. But so would he, and now he wasn't just fighting for Ilana. He was fighting with her. Asterisk smoke still curled around the moon's surface. Sparks flickered from shattered metal. The syndicate ships were burning wrecks, but Ray didn't feel like they had one. Not yet. Ilana lay in his arms, weak, her glow fading. The energy she had released was not natural, not safe. It had drained her like a dying star. Ray carried her back into the ship, placed her on the bench where she had first spoken to him. Her breathing was slow, shallow. He didn't have a doctor didn't have a cure, but he had a reason, and sometimes reason was enough to move mountains. He activated the long-range scanner. There was only one place left that made sense. The Syndicate's core lab station, orbiting a frozen exoplanet. That's where they built their weapons. And that's where they would take her DNA. She was too weak to fight again, but Ray could. He patched the ship the best he could, limped it back into orbit. The hull groaned. With every mile, every burst of thrust, but it moved, and that's all he needed. Ilana opened her eyes once as they neared the frozen planet. I shouldn't have used it, she said, voice like a whisper. You saved me, Ray replied. So now I'm going to return the favor. He didn't have a plan. Didn't have backup. What he had was an old ship, a heart full of fire, and one human brain that refused to quit. He slipped into the outer defense grid using junker codes from his smuggling days. Inside the main syndicate station, there were no windows, just metal, silence, and shadows. Ray docked quietly, climbed out, and began planting charges along the outer corridor. If he couldn't win the fight, he'd make sure no one else did either. Then he moved in, fast and silent. The guards were elite, trained, armored. Ray was just one man in a dirty coat with a stolen blaster. But that's what made him dangerous. He wasn't supposed to get this far. He breached the lab door. With a plasma spike, kicked it open and stopped. Inside, a glass pod, wires everywhere. Ilana, floating again, restrained, her body shaking, and around her scientists, syndicate officers, and one familiar figure, Captain Myra Vex, alive, armored, waiting for him. She smiled without warmth. "Ray, always show up late. Ray." "Raise the blaster, let her go." "She's already gone," Mira said, stepping aside. "They're not extracting her knowledge, they're uploading something into her." "A virus, a control lock." Ray's hands tightened. "You'll turn her into a weapon." Myra shrugged. "She's not your friend, Ray. She's a tool, an artifact. She was never meant to survive." Ray stepped forward slowly. "She survived. Because she wanted to. She chose to live, to feel. That makes her real." Myra raised her gun. "That makes her dangerous." Ray fired first. The shot hit Mira's shoulder, not fatal, but enough to drop her. He dove for the console, slammed every shutdown switch he could find. Alarms blared, lights flashed, the pod hissed open. Ilana fell into his arms again, weak but conscious. Ray lifted her, ignoring the pain in his own body. "We're leaving," he said. "Ray," she whispered. "You need to destroy it." Behind them, the machine was still running. The core AI had begun replicating itself, preparing to transmit her knowledge across the galaxy if it escaped. The Syndicate would never need her again. They'd have the power to rewrite everything. Ray placed her gently beside the exit hatch. Then he turned around. "Get to the ship," he said. She grabbed his arm. "You won't make it." He smiled. The way humans smile when they're about to do something stupid and brave. "I'm human," he said. "We don't do things because they're safe." He ran back into the lab, used the charges he had planted earlier, linked them to the core reactor, set a timer. Short, too short. Myra tried to stand, gun in hand. But Ray didn't stop. He knocked her out cold with the butt of the blaster. Then he turned to the control panel, and with one final breath, he whispered, "No one hurts her again." The explosion lit up the sky. The lab station burned like a dying sun. Ilana watched from the ship, eyes wide, chest tight. She felt the moment his signal vanished. She screamed, not with sound, but with light. A pulse of energy wrapped around the ship, flung it away before the flames could reach. Inside the silence, she curled into the pilot's seat, alone now, but not broken. Ray had given everything, not for a weapon, not for a reward, but for her, because no one else would. The stars were quiet again. No sirens, no gunfire, no pursuit, just silence. A silence so deep, it wrapped around Ilana like a blanket too heavy to lift. She floated through space in Ray's half-broken ship. Systems damaged, hull cracked. Engines running on emergency backup. The blast had pushed them far from the Syndicate station, far from the wreckage, far from him. She sat in the pilot's seat, knees pulled close, silver hair drifting weightless around her face. The controls blinked lazily, screens flickered, but she didn't touch them. She couldn't, not yet, outside the window. Nebula clouds swirled like distant memories. Planets turned slowly in the dark, unaware of what had been lost. Ilana stared at her reflection in the glass. Not a weapon, not a vault, not an artifact. Just a girl who had been alone too long. Ray's coat still rested on the chair beside her, torn, stained, warm with memory. She reached for it gently, pulled it over her shoulders. It didn't fit right, but it made her feel less hollow. She whispered his name once, not into space. Not for anyone to hear, just for herself. Ray, the eye's voice came online. Damaged but still functional. Warning, life support at 30%. She ignored it. She opened the memory crystal embedded in her chest, the last link to her ancestors. It pulsed softly, waiting for a command. She could activate the codes, restart the ancient machine buried in her genes. She could reshape reality, just as the syndicate had dreamed, but she didn't. Because he had never once asked for power. He had asked for one thing only: her life, her freedom, her choice. That was what made him different. That was what made him human. She closed the crystal again, placed her hand over her heart. No more running, she whispered. She powered up the ship's beacon, set a signal to broadcast. Not a distress call, not a song, but a story. A human story. His story. It traveled across deep space, bouncing between satellites. Passing through broken networks, one line repeated at the end of every loop. He didn't come to save the galaxy. He came to save me, back on Earth. A signal tech heard the message and reported it. Soon others heard it too. People from old colonies, frontier worlds. Even former syndicate zones. They didn't know who Ilana was, but they listened. Because the story wasn't about aliens or war. It was about a mechanic who heard a voice no one else could, and answered it. Months passed, then a year. Ilana built a small home on a quiet moon, far from conflict. She planted seeds, repaired machines, watched the sunrise each morning. And every night she lit a beacon from her roof, just in case. One day, while repairing a solar panel, she heard something, a sound too familiar to mistake. A cough, then footsteps, then a voice behind her. Your wiring's still terrible, she froze, heart stopped, turned slowly. There he was, dirty, limping, grinning like he had just crawled out of hell, because maybe he had. Ray Carson, very much alive. She ran to him without thinking, arms wrapping around him before her mind could catch up. He held her just as tight, laughing through tears. I told you I'd keep you safe, he said. She pulled back, looking at his face. How? He tapped his chest. Old escape pod, barely made it. AI kept me in stasis until rescue. He looked around. Nice moon, kinda empty. She laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. Not anymore. They sat together, under the stars. No words for a while. Just silence, the good kind this time. And in that silence, one truth remained. The galaxy was full of monsters, empires, machines, and fear. But none of it mattered. Because one human heard a forgotten girl's voice across the stars. And he answered, not for duty, not for glory, just because no one else would. And that was enough to change everything.